Hey folks, and welcome to this video in the Profile Builder series, where we'll see how to create integrated checklists to guide the users of your profile. Now, Rhapsody calls these Guide Me's. The Profile Builder has a sample Guide Me, and I can access that directly from this custom welcome screen. When I click the link, it opens in this Guide Me panel on the right. Now, I'll show you how to create a welcome screen like this in the next video. If you don't have a welcome screen, then you can open Guide Me's from this menu, Help and Guide Me. Now, there is a catalogue at the top that contains the out-of-the-box Guide Me's that ship with Rhapsody. You can add to that list, but it requires modifying the Rhapsody install, so that's not really recommended. Instead, you can choose Select a Guide Me and then browse to the Guide Me file, which is an XML file and can be tricky to write by hand, which is where the Profile Builder comes in. So let's create one by modeling it. I'll begin by adding a new Guide Me package. Let's call it Network Guide Me's, but it doesn't really matter at all what you call this. As with the other aspects in Profile Builder, this package has a tag where I can indicate that this is the root Guide Me package for a specific profile. And if I point it at our network's profile, I don't have to worry about where the files need to be generated. The Profile Builder will work all of that out for me. Next, I'll add a new Guide Me diagram, Getting Started. Now, the starting point for any Guide Me is this Guide Me model element. So let's add that to the diagram, and once again I'll call it Getting Started. Let's also now give that a short description. Very simple, this Guide Me walks you through building a simple network. Now let's generate it and see what it looks like. Now, I can generate a single Guide Me at a time from its context menu, or if I have more than one, I can right-click the package and generate all of them in one go. Now, notice here in the output window, a new XML file has been created for our Guide Me. If I copy that path and then I paste that into Windows Explorer, I can then easily open that in our text editor and take a look at it. Now there, as you can see, it's pretty standard XML format with specific custom tags like cheat sheet. Now let's see what that looks like in Rhapsody. So I'll go back to that Help menu, I'll choose Select Guide Me, and then I'll paste that path into the XML file we just saw. Of course, I could also browse for it. And there is our initial Guide Me. Now, before we go any further, let's go to the properties for our project, and I'm going to set this property, auto-generate Guide Me files on save. So I don't need to manually generate them anymore. A save will do that for me. Now let's add some detail. Well, Guide Me's are pretty simple. They have steps, and those steps may optionally have substeps. There are also actions that you can embed into steps. Those are pretty limited right now, but I do know the IBM development team does intend to beef up that part. But let's work with what we have. Let's add a new step, and we'll call it Add a Network Package. Now, of course, here the names are important. The names of these artifacts become the titles of the sections in the checklist. Let's add that to our Guide Me with a has-step relationship. And we'll give that a simple description. If I now save, then the new Guide Me file is automatically generated. Now, that Guide Me panel over here is actually a kind of mini web browser, so I can right-click its background and select Refresh to have it load in the changed file, which is much faster than loading it again from that Help menu. Let's now add a second step. We'll call that one Build a Network. And let's also use the has-step relationship to connect it to the Guide Me. Now, this time I won't add a description because I'm going to add substeps. You can have both if, for example, you want a step to give some high-level introduction to the substeps. But let's quickly create two substeps, add a server, and also add a printer, and we'll connect them to the step with the has substep relationship. As before, I'll give these some very simple descriptions. Now I can save, and then once again refresh that Guide Me panel. Now both steps and substeps can be made skippable using this tag. So let's set this one on the Add a Printer substep. Again, we'll save and we'll refresh, and there we can see the difference. The substep gets this extra icon, allowing the user to skip a step. Now there are two ways in which we can build that Guide Me structure. In this example, we've used relationships. Instead, we could also choose to nest steps and substeps directly. Now there are pros and cons to both approaches. Using relationships means that these steps and substeps become somewhat reusable. We could include them in other steps or other Guide Me's by adding relationships from those. But then the model browser isn't quite as easy to read as one where these elements are directly nested. Now, of course, if they are directly nested, they're not reusable. This custom model browser does provide a clearer view of the Guide Me when we have used relationships. Now, the order that model elements appear in the browser, either the nested elements or the relations, dictates the order of the sections in the Guide Me, so it's super easy to restructure one. For example, I can move the entire Build a Network section to the top using the Browser Up button. Now make sure it is the relation you move if you've used them. Let's save, and then we can refresh again to see the change. Now Build a Network comes before Add a Network package. Well, that doesn't make much sense, so I'm going to change the model. I'm going to restore the original order. Let's now add an action. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is very limited right now. In fact, there are only 3. There's create a model, open a model, and launch an application. The first 2 are pretty useless for profiles, since if you're viewing the Guide Me, then you've already created or opened a project. So let's use the third. Let's create a new launch application action called Open Explorer. And we can connect that to a step using the appropriate relationship. Now note that steps can have either actions or substeps, but not both. Rhapsody will not allow this. If you try to model it in the Profile Builder, then Profile Builder will detect that and it will raise an error. Now the action has a tag where you can enter a path to an application to open. Of course we can fill in manually, or I'm going to use one of the predefined Profile Builder helpers to browse for a file. In this case, it's going to be C, Windows, and then Explorer.exe. Now, if we save, and then again refresh the Guide Me, then we still don't see any action. Why not? Well, Rhapsody hides any actions in Guide Me's until the previous steps have been performed. If I click the initial click to begin, which effectively completes that step, now the action becomes visible. Also, another thing that becomes visible, this click when complete, that was hidden again until now, until we've completed any previous steps. Lastly, formatting. Guide Me's do support some simple formatting: bold, italic, underline, bullet points, as well as hyperlinks and links to other Guide Me's, but only in steps and substeps, not in the introduction section. Now you can apply that formatting in the description fields, and the Guide Me generator will convert that RTF text into the XML format used by Guide Me's. Well, that's it for this video. In the next one, we'll take a look at how we create those welcome screens and use them to make accessing Guide Me's much easier for your users.